within the white walls of an apartment in Torremolinos, Spain. A horrific secret was concealed for nearly a decade. This is not just the story of a beautiful young Albanian woman who vanished without a trace, but also the relentless pursuit of justice by a mother and the painful recurrence of violence. When Marco Antonio Navarro Tacoronte finally confessed to his heinous crime in 2023, the journey from love to hatred, from concealment to revelation, painted a dark picture of toxic relationships and their devastating consequences. Sibora Gagani was born on September 14, 1991 in Tana, Albania, carrying the natural beauty of the Balkan region with her tanned skin, tall and slender figure, and long, lustrous hair. Her nickname, CBI, given by her friends, reflected her cheerful, lively, and beloved personality. She had a passion for vibrant music and loved lively parties. But alongside this, Sibora had a warm heart for children and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Sibora's life was far from easy. After her parents' divorce, her mother, Elisabetta, moved with her children to Rome, Italy, where she worked tirelessly to raise them alone in such challenging circumstances. Sibora matured early and understood her family responsibilities. She not only pursued her personal dreams, but also participated in local beauty pageants, even winning some. Alongside her studies, she worked as a waitress at a local restaurant to help support her family financially. In 2009, when Sibora was just 18 years old, fate brought her into contact with Marco Antonio Navarro Tacoronte, a 31-year-old man. Marco possessed a charming appearance with a striking height and a handsome face, easily capturing the attention of young women. However, beneath this appealing exterior lay a troubled past. Marco had experienced a failed marriage and had a complicated personal life with his sister. More critically, he had a history of violence and addiction and was a familiar figure to local police. These warning signs, if recognized early, could have entirely altered Sibora's fate. Nevertheless, first love is often blind, and Sibora fell deeply for Marco's charm. She could not have imagined that this relationship would lead to tragic consequences that she would pay for with her life. After a year of dating in Italy, in 2011, Marco convinced Sibora to move to Torremolinos, in the province of Malaga, Spain. The reason he gave was a lack of job opportunities in Italy, and Spain would offer them a better fresh start. Sibora, with her intense love for Marco and faith in their shared future, agreed to leave her homeland to follow her lover. Initially, life in the beachside area of La Carihuela seemed like a dream. The young couple appeared to have found happiness in this new land. Sibora continued working as a waitress, a job she was familiar with, while Marco worked as a chef and pizza maker. Their life seemed to be on a path of stability and growth. However, the first cracks in their relationship soon began to appear. Marco proved incapable of holding a steady job, creating financial pressure for both of them. More significantly, his pathologically jealous nature started to surface, leading to increasingly frequent and intense arguments. Sibora's mother, Elisabetta, during visits to her daughter in Spain, witnessed firsthand the heated arguments between Sibora and Marco. This caused her immense concern for her daughter's situation. Sibora also had to return to Italy multiple times, possibly due to residency issues or even using a false identity to move freely. These trips back home were, in reality, Sibora's attempts to escape Marco's control and violence. However, the typical cycle of domestic abuse repeated itself after each argument and act of violence. Marco would show remorse, promise to change, and persuade Sibora to return. By the end of 2013, after nearly 3 years of a deeply damaging relationship, Sibora found the courage to make a significant decision. She returned to her mother's home in Italy and declared that she would leave Marco for good, exhausted by the toxic relationship. However, Marco was not one to let go easily. He went to Elisabetta's house, once again promising to change completely and even proposing to Sibora, in a moment of weakness, perhaps due to lingering love or his sweet promises. Sibora agreed to return to Marco. Initially, after their reunion, things seemed to improve, but it was not long before the violence returned, even more severe than before. Sibora began living in constant fear and confided in her mother that she felt she had to disappear to truly escape Marco, as he would never let her leave peacefully. June 2014 marked a pivotal moment in Sibora's life. With fierce determination to reclaim her life, she left the apartment she shared with Marco and moved to a separate one. In a phone call with her mother, Sibora's voice was filled with joy and hope as she said she had ended things and felt free like a butterfly. This was likely the first time in years that Sibora felt she truly had control over her life. She began planning for the future, possibly returning to Italy or starting a new chapter in Spain without Marco's oppressive presence. However, the freedom Sibora longed for would not last long. Marco, with his controlling nature and inability to accept defeat, would not let her slip from his grasp so easily. In the early days of July 2014, tensions between Sibora and Marco reached a boiling point. Although she had moved out, Sibora still had to maintain some level of contact with Marco, possibly due to unresolved issues or pressure from him. The last recorded contact between them was a WhatsApp message on July 7, 2014. After that message, Sibora's phone went completely silent, and all her social media accounts fell unusually quiet. This was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. While the exact details of what happened in the apartment on that fateful day are known only to Marco. Later, evidence revealed that Sibora became the victim of a brutal attack. The young Albanian woman was stabbed multiple times, each wound reflecting deep cruelty and hatred. What is particularly chilling is that Marco did not stop at killing Sibora after committing the crime. He devised a meticulous plan to conceal the evidence. According to his later confession, he lived with Sibora's body in the apartment for 2 days before deciding to hide it. Marco displayed a terrifying coldness in handling the aftermath of his crime. He prepared a wooden box, placed Sibora's body in a sleeping bag, and then put it in the box along with lime to prevent decomposition. In an act of grim irony, he even placed a bouquet of flowers on the plastic bag containing her body. The blood-stained knife used in the crime was also hidden by Marco, along with other personal belongings of Sibora. He then built a false wall in the bedroom of the apartment to completely conceal all evidence of the horrific crime. After hiding the body, Marco began a prolonged act of feigning concern over Sibora's disappearance. In early July 2014, he called Elisabetta in Italy, asking if Sibora had returned home. He claimed they had argued 2 days earlier, and since then, Sibora had vanished, leaving all her belongings behind. Elisabetta immediately grew suspicious. She recalled her daughter telling her about leaving Marco a month earlier, and it was entirely out of character for Sibora to stop contacting her mother. However, Marco maintained his story with carefully crafted details when his initial story failed to convince anyone. Marco altered his version. He began claiming that the building's security guard had seen Sibora leave with 2 suitcases, but no one knew where she was headed. This story seemed more plausible and gave the impression that Sibora had left voluntarily. In the following week, Marco put on a remarkable psychological performance. He flew to Italy, sat down for coffee with Elisabetta, and even met with Sibora's brother. Marco helped print missing person posters and hung them around the area, Presenting himself as a concerned and worried boyfriend, he offered various theories about where Sabora might have gone. Perhaps she had taken a bus to Argentina, or someone had seen her arguing with a dark-skinned man. All these stories were told convincingly, leading those around him to believe he was also searching for Sabora. Notably, Marco never reported Sabora's disappearance to the police when questioned. He always had excuses to delay or avoid doing so. It was Elisabetta, driven by a mother's intuition, who first reported her daughter's disappearance to the authorities. From the outset, Elisabetta suspected Marco. She knew her daughter's character and understood that Sabora would never disappear without contacting her family. Moreover, Marco's failure to report the disappearance and the inconsistencies in his statements heightened her suspicions. The police questioned Marco as the last person to have seen Sabora. He confirmed they had broken up but maintained contact during a search. The police found some of Sabora's personal belongings still in the apartment, increasing suspicion about Marco's story. However, there was no concrete evidence to suggest Marco had harmed Sabora. The case gradually became a cold case as leads dried up and the search yielded no results. In 2015, the case was expanded into a national search campaign through missing persons organizations. Italian media spread information about Sabora, hoping to uncover new leads. However, all efforts were fruitless, and the case faded into obscurity. In the years that followed, Marco completely changed his appearance. He shaved his head, grew a beard, and adopted a persona entirely different from the one during his time with Sabora. Marco continued living in Spain, maintaining good relations with neighbors, regularly going to the gym, and pursuing hobbies like shooting, baseball, and martial arts. Notably, Marco entered 2 new relationships after Sabora, both of which ended with the women filing complaints against him. This demonstrated that his pattern of abusive and violent behavior persisted, though it had not yet reached the tragic level of Sabora's case. By 2023, Marco was in a new relationship with Paula, a woman who had a child from a previous marriage. Paula and Marco later had a child together. However, Paula's life was upended when she lost custody of her child due to drugs found in their home. Linked to Marco, Marco and Paula worked together at a restaurant owned by Victor Molina, a friend of Marco's. Initially, Paula was highly regarded and trusted at work. However, Marco caused issues. He broke a toilet door and repeatedly accused Paula of infidelity, leading to his transfer to another location under Victor's supervision. Paula confided in Victoria, Victor's sister, about what she endured from Marco. She revealed that Marco had physically assaulted her 4 punches and 1 kick, and although she no longer loved him, she pretended everything was fine to have a chance at regaining custody of her child. Paula was undergoing weekly drug tests and hoped to reunite with her child by October 2023. Marco was eventually fired after a month and a half due to a missing kitchen knife, and Victor reported the incident to the police. The mounting tensions in Marco and Paula's relationship created the perfect environment for another tragedy. On May 16, 2023, Paula seemed cheerful during her day off and had plans for the evening. No one could have suspected it would be her last day. On the morning of May 17, 2023, at 11:30, desperate screams were heard from Marco and Paula's apartment. Victor and other employees knocked on the door and heard faint moans from inside. When they asked, Marco replied that everything was fine and Paula was sleeping. Sensing something was wrong, Victor retrieved a spare key and called the police. Marco fled the apartment before the police arrived. When the police entered, they found Paula dead on the floor, with multiple stab wounds initially reported as 14, later discovered to be more, and blood-soaked clothing. Marco was arrested at 5:30 p.m. that day while drinking a beer, offering no resistance during the investigation. Police discovered that Marco had been looking for Paula the previous night and had asked a taxi driver about her, when Marco was brought to the police station after Paula's murder. A small detail changed the entire course of Cibora's case. The police station wall still displayed missing person posters for Cibora Gagani, the very posters Marco had helped print and distribute nearly a decade earlier. Seeing Cibora's image, Marco had an unexpected reaction, perhaps due to the psychological pressure of having just killed Paula, or the accumulated guilt over the years. Marco decided to confess to Cibora's murder. He told the police that he had killed Cibora and hidden her body in the wall of their old apartment. Marco even offered to lead the police to the location of the body. This was the breakthrough the investigation had been waiting for after nearly a decade. On May 20th, 2023, Marco appeared in court for Paula's case. He chose to remain silent and requested a psychiatric evaluation and toxicology test. Marco was held without bail on charges of murder with elements of gender-based violence. Marco's confession about Cibora sparked a new investigation after nearly a decade. The police quickly contacted the current owner of the old apartment. Unfortunately, the new tenant was willing to cooperate with the investigation. Finding Cibora's body was not as straightforward as Marco had suggested. The investigation team conducted 3 searches of the apartment without success. They examined the walls and floors, using a densitometer and endoscopic cameras, but found nothing unusual. In his statement, Marco claimed he had used acid to dispose of the body, which could explain the difficulty in locating it. However, forensic experts believed some trace evidence must still remain. The 4th search yielded an unexpected result. Instead of relying solely on Marco's statements, the team compared the original architectural plans of the apartment to its current state. They discovered an anomalous space in the bedroom wall, an area that should not have existed according to the original plans. On June 6, 2023, when the false wall was demolished, the team uncovered a wooden box filled with lime. This was where Marco had hidden Cibora's body for nearly a decade. Inside the wooden box, investigators found a horrifying yet forensically significant scene. They discovered the blood-stained knife used to kill Cibora, along with her personal belongings. Notably, the bouquet of flowers placed on the plastic bag containing her body stood out as an ironic and psychologically complex detail. Inside the sleeping bag, they found the remains of a woman, relatively well preserved due to the lime. The victim's identity was confirmed through DNA testing compared to a saliva sample from Elizabeta, confirming with 100% certainty that it was Cibora Gagani. Additionally, forensic experts identified her through distinctive tattoos on her body, which Cibora had when alive. The cause of death was determined to be multiple stab wounds, mirroring Paula's case nearly a decade later, when the news of Cibora's body being found was announced. Elizabeta experienced a devastating emotional shock. For nearly a decade, she had clung to the faint hope that her daughter was still alive somewhere. The confirmation of Cibora's death shattered her last hopes, but also brought some solace in knowing the truth. During this time, Elizabeta was also experiencing joy from becoming a grandmother through her son. The contrast between joy and pain created a complex emotional period in her life. Cibora's father had passed away due to illness without ever knowing his daughter's fate, which may have been a small mercy in this tragic context. After more than 5 months of legal and forensic proceedings, Cibora's body was finally repatriated to Italy. A funeral was held, attended by family, friends, and those who loved her, in a poignant gesture. Her friends released balloons carrying messages of love and final farewells to Cibora. This was not only a funeral but also the closure of a painful chapter for those who loved Cibora. After nearly a decade of waiting and searching, they could finally say a proper goodbye. On January 30th, 2024, Marco submitted a 17-page letter to the court, confessing to killing Paula but claiming it was in self-defense. According to Marco, the incident occurred after an argument over a 50 EUR debt and his discovery of Paula's infidelity. He also claimed their relationship had become chaotic due to alcohol and cocaine. However, Marco's stance on Sabora's case was entirely different. He denied killing her, though he admitted to wrapping her body in a bag, placing it in a wooden box with flowers and lime, and building a false wall to conceal it. Marco claimed this act made him feel disgusted, but that he was forced to do it. In his statement about Sabora, Marco spun a convoluted and implausible story about criminal gangs. According to him, Sabora had borrowed 25,000 EUR from the Albanian mafia to open a brothel, but was later robbed of the money by Colombian gangs. He claimed 4 gunmen came to the apartment to collect the debt, killed Sabora in the process, and took 9,000 EUR. They allegedly spared Marco on the condition that he hide the body and not report it to the police. According to this account, Marco lived with Sabora's body for 2 days before concealing it. This story sounded more like a Hollywood action movie script than the truth. Legal and psychological experts believed it was Marco's final attempt to evade responsibility for Sabora's murder, while explaining how he knew the exact location of her body. As of May 16, 2024, the court decided to try Paula's case with a jury on charges of murder and domestic abuse. This was a significant step toward bringing Marco to justice for at least one of the 2 horrific crimes he committed. However, Sabora's case still lacked an official trial date. This may be due to the legal complexity surrounding a crime committed so long ago, as well as the time needed to prepare sufficient evidence and testimonies. Sabora Gagani's case is not just a story of an individual crime, but a mirror reflecting deeper societal issues. It illustrates how the cycle of domestic violence can escalate to deadly levels and underscores the importance of recognizing early warning signs. Sabora's story also highlights the critical role of family and community in supporting victims of abuse. Elisabetta's persistence in searching for her daughter and never giving up hope was a key factor in preventing the case from being entirely forgotten. Finally, this case demonstrates that justice may come late but is never absent. After nearly a decade, the truth was finally uncovered, and Marco will have to face the consequences of his brutal actions. Sabora Gagani, the young Albanian woman with simple dreams of becoming a teacher and caring for children, has become a symbol for victims of domestic violence worldwide. Though her life ended tragically, her story will live on in people's hearts, reminding us of the importance of protecting vulnerable women in society.